The last wild bison seen here was 1870, 150 years gone. In 2014, 30 were brought back, and what followed wasn't what anyone predicted. Not scientists, not volunteers, not the people who rebuilt this land. The story was supposed to be straightforward. Return the missing grazer to Illinois tallgrass prairie, and the ecosystem reorganizes itself. Wildflowers spread, plant diversity climbs. The landscape visibly transforms. The classic keystone species story. Except years of careful monitoring found no dramatic shift in the plants. The prairie, by the numbers, looked almost the same. But something was changing. Not where anyone thought to look. Not in the grasses or the wildflowers. Underneath, in the dung. In the movement of beetles and the foraging paths of mice and voles. In the nesting cover of a sparrow most people have never heard of. Illinois brought back its bison and stumbled into an unexpected insect revolution happening entirely underfoot. To understand what researchers found beneath the surface, though, you first have to understand what was lost above it and what it took to bring it back. Before the plow and the train, 30 million bison shaped the continent. They were the architects of the grassland. But a connected system of hide hunters, railroad expansion, and eastern markets quickly dismantled that reality. The animals became mere commodities. By 1888, the entire continental population fell to fewer than 600 individuals. At the same time, a parallel collapse occurred in Illinois. The region originally held 22 million acres of native tallgrass prairie. Then came the steel plow. Rapid agricultural expansion systematically stripped the thick root systems to plant corn and soy. Today, less than 0.1% of that original ecosystem survives. So, Illinois kept its official nickname, the Prairie State, but it lost the actual grass. And it lost the massive grazer that made the prairie work. This double collapse left a quiet, empty landscape, setting up a century of total absence. In 1986, the Nature Conservancy bought the first degraded cornfields at Nachusa. Then began the slow work of restoration. Volunteers contributed more than 200,000 hours of manual labor. They spent nearly 3 decades rebuilding the soil from scratch. They hand-picked native seeds from tiny remnant patches. They hand-planted the former fields. They hacked back invasive weeds. They lit carefully planned prescribed burns to mimic historic fires and suppress woody trees. But the restored grass was still empty. A true prairie needs its massive grazer to function. So, on October 22, 2014, the gates opened. 30 bison stepped onto the grass. These animals came from conservation herds with a pure, wild-type lineage. The release established the first wild herd of its kind east of the Mississippi in roughly 2 centuries. Then came the spring of 2015. A single healthy calf was born on the open prairie. It was the first wild bison birth in Illinois in approximately 200 years. State records show a single, stray bison was killed near the Kankakee River in 1870. But that 1870 date was just a lonely, dying outlier. The actual functioning ecological presence of a wild herd had been missing for over 2 centuries. Now, after decades of human labor, the prairie had its engine back. Everyone anticipated a dramatic shift. Conservationists call it the keystone species effect. It is the same concept seen when wolves returned to Yellowstone or beavers rebuilt western creeks. The assumption was simple. A massive animal should visibly rewrite the entire prairie. But the process is physical. The bison graze unevenly. They eat the dominant grasses, creating patches of short lawns right next to tall, untouched cover. Then they wallow. They roll in the dirt, creating raw depressions that expose bare ground and alter plant competition. This physical disturbance should let in more light, redistribute nutrients, and kickstart a diverse plant revolution. So, researchers set up a massive ecological test. The herd grew from the initial 30 animals to roughly 100. They roamed inside a fenced 1,500-acre enclosure. Observers watched and waited for the vegetation to transform. But where exactly does a prairie's rebirth begin? A University of Illinois research team set up 25-meter paired plots inside and outside the 1,500-acre enclosure. They monitored them for 9 years. The data was clear. Year after year, the Shannon Diversity Index showed no statistically significant difference in overall plant species richness between the grazed and ungrazed areas. But a flat plant count is not a failure. It just means the traditional metrics were looking at the wrong level. The real revolution was happening underfoot. A single bison deposits 8 to 10 kilograms of dung every single day. Pitfall traps soon revealed a 70% spike in dung beetle abundance where the animals grazed. These insects tunnel and roll, dragging nutrients down into the soil and accelerating decomposition. Nobody made a viral video about beetles, but the beetles were the story. Then other underfoot changes followed. Predatory ground beetles altered their foraging tactics in the trampled soil. Deer mice and meadow voles changed their behavior too. They cut their nightly foraging bouts near active wallows by 15%, adjusting to a new landscape of risk and opportunity in the exposed dirt. The wallows themselves became small open patch generators, retaining 20% more moisture and creating cooler microclimates for pioneer plants. But bison did not do this alone. The true engine of diversity was the interaction between grazing and prescribed fire. Spring burns cleared the accumulated vegetation, and summer grazing created a structural patchwork. The bison ate the fresh grasses down to 15 centimeters, while leaving other ungrazed areas 30 centimeters tall. This mosaic of short lawn, bare soil, and dense cover was exactly what Henslow's sparrows needed for concealment and nesting. The data reveals a quiet ecological truth. Recovery does not always arrive as a field-wide plant diversity headline. Instead, it shows up first in the small details. It appears in movement, behavior, resource use, and nutrient cycling. The transformation of the prairie is not a sudden botanical replacement. It is a slow, buzzing rewiring of the dirt itself. But the Nachusa herd is confined to a 1,500-acre enclosure. Around them lies a flat, impenetrable barrier of highways, towns, and private cornfields. They cannot leave, and no other wild herds can reach them. 40 miles away, Mediwin National Tallgrass Prairie supports a separate herd of approximately 70 bison. Then, another small group of 6 animals arrived in Kane County in late 2025. But these separate Illinois herds have no regular animal exchange. They lack any physical connection. No animals move naturally between the preserves. The highways are too wide. The cornfields are too dense. Each herd exists on its own. Different management teams run them as separate projects. So there is no gene flow. Gene flow is the movement of genetic material between populations through reproduction. Without it, small closed populations face long-term genetic diversity concerns. In breeding, risks rise over generations. The animals lose their natural disease resistance. Their reproductive health declines. They lose the physical resilience needed to adapt to a changing environment. So, bringing the species back was only the first step. Keeping a healthy population alive for the next 200 years is a completely different problem. Right now, every Illinois bison herd functions as an isolated island. They are trapped in a flat sea of modern agriculture. And the unresolved question is whether these isolated islands can ever become a single, resilient population. The cameras will always follow the bison, but the real revolution is underfoot, silent in the dirt. We returned an icon, yet it remains isolated. Can these islands ever connect? Let us know in the comments.